everybody. My name is Sambhavi Lakshminarayanan, as you very correctly pronounced. And I want to talk a little bit about teaching business ethics. Originally, I had thought that I would present it as teaching, well, ethics in the context of business. But after listening to my previous presenters, I think it's just important to teach students ethics anyway. But regardless, I prepared the presentation for business, so that's what I'm going to do. So this is the outline of my talk: is why should business students learn about ethics, and is it any use to teach students ethics, and then the mechanics of actually teaching about ethics. So firstly, just to give a brief idea of why in business programs you give so much importance to talking about ethics, is that right away we teach students right at the beginning that the purpose of a business we can understand is either to make profit or to do social good. And of course, we would say it is both, but it might go more than one way or the other. But this is there. And while there is not a clear winning side, almost everybody would agree that business actions affect the business itself and all the stakeholders, but also larger society, of course, depending on how big the business is. So, for instance, if you look back, I don't know if you all remember, Enron in 2001 was huge. And what happened at Enron not only affected Enron because, the company was gone, and almost everyone who worked at Enron, a lot of people said they're never going to work for a corporate entity again. They're going to start their own business. But also, even other people, general society felt it because a lot of, say, pension funds had invested in Enron. So just to say that, and just last year was another huge thing that happened with the cryptocurrency, the FTX and Alameda. So what businesses do affects not only the business and the employees and the owners and so on, but also larger society. And business actions, whether they are intentional or not, can have this impact, and ethical or not also. But then business actions don't just happen, right? The actions are based on decisions of people in the business. So individuals in the business, and you might say the owners or the board members, the chief executives, and so on. So how do people actually make decisions? And in the context that we are interested, ethical decisions. You might say that an individual's value system and ethics forms the foundation of many decisions. And so that's kind of the reason into why we talk about ethics in business programs. And I just want to mention that in the recent past, we have heard all these words. But CSR has been there for a long time, that is corporate social responsibility. And the last few years is DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, and ESG, environmental, social, and governance issues. So it seems that, society is saying to businesses, you've gone a little too far in the way of profitability, come back to being socially responsible. So in business education, we would think that if not all business leaders and all business executives, at least some of them will be able to enforce. And so that's why we think about talking about ethics. But then we could ask, is teaching ethics of any use? Because by the time students come to us, they are already adults. So aren't people's basic values and ethics formed in their formative years when they are growing up? Can people actually change their values or their ethics? And there have been research to show that it is in fact possible. So Hollier et al., for instance, did a longitudinal study over many years to show that there is impact on ethical attitudes of talking and teaching about ethics. Weber, whose papers I've referenced a lot in my work, actually had surveyed both business students and managers after they had graduated. And he found that there is an impact on decision-making of teaching about ethics, but he said it kind of wears away over time. So this need for constant refreshing on ethics. Nolan Hotham had said that including ethics education kind of tells students about what are the limits of behavior and what could be considered as acceptable conduct. And finally, very interesting paper by Ariel et al. Is that they actually changed the curriculum in accounting programs and they influence student attitudes towards very specific values. So that was kind of interesting because my next issue to talk about is So if we say that, teaching about ethics is effective, right? It is useful in business program. What would we mean by effective? So what are goals that we should look for when we are talking about ethics? We could say on the one end that we simply make students aware about ethical issues or, values. So we can create awareness and even have students analyze business situations, business decisions, business actions. On the other end, you could say that we actually tell students what kinds of attitudes are preferable, what kinds of values they should have. So we emphasize the importance of certain values and we encourage. I should invite, what should I do? He's the expert. He's one of the.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. So we could go towards actually changing students' attitudes and even values. I'm going to step aside a little bit because here we have said, if we say that ethics education is important, ethics education is effective, so then how would we go about delivering this education? So I want to talk for just for a minute about, in general in college education, it has been found that a kind of one-size-fits-all approach that everybody, that all colleges use the same kind of approach is generally not effective. And in fact, some students do not accrue all the benefits that are supposed to be there. And so especially students from underrepresented groups. So we need to be aware of what our students are coming in with and who our students are. So this approach called TILT, which stands for Transparency in Learning and Teaching, has been shown to be effective in getting student outcomes. And its two basic principles are access and relevance. That is, students should perceive learning as accessible to them and relevant to them. And its three basic components are purpose. That is, it should answer the question for students, why should I learn this? Right? And often our students say, why should I learn it? It's not going to be of use to me. The second one is that what will I need to do in order to learn this? So the tasks like completing an assignment, writing a paper. And the third is criteria, which is that how will my learning be assessed? So their perspective of the people who had started this TILT approach is that once students get this kind of information and they are convinced of it, then they will learn better. And co-author and I, we had talked about tilting or changing business pedagogies so that it fulfills all these for various business pedagogies. So just to put this all together, so if you're talking about including ethics in business education, and we do use various pedagogies to teach this, so how could this be done? That is really my area of interest. It's not finished, so but that's why I gave around this paper. It's not really assessment of this presentation, but really I want to tap into your thoughts about how this could be approached. So how would we know what students are coming in with? What are their ethical attitudes? What is their thinking about different values? So we have to know somehow. And one way, so just to say that ethics is generally a sense of right or wrong. It could be on anything, it's context free, right? It could be business, it could be about whether to use ChatGPT, could be anything. And values are what are important to individuals. So our thinking is that actions are going to be based on what people consider as right or wrong, and also what is important to them. So one way that we could learn about our students is by this survey called the Rockledge Value Survey. And Rockledge had developed 36 values. 18 of them he called as instrumental values and 18 as terminal. So terminal are the end goals and instrumental are the means to get to those end goals. So these are the values. You can see the terminal values and instrumental values. And we can group, so some other researchers group them together. So terminal values were grouped as personal values or social values, and instrumental values as competence values or moral values. And this has been used, the Rockledge survey has been used in many different contexts in academia and businesses nationally. And in particular, Weber had done a lot of the survey of business students. And that is why we thought that maybe this is one way that we could understand what our students' values and attitudes are towards ethics. So Weber, in fact, had put together 4 managerial orientations. So if you want to think of students going out and being in the business world, And these four were basically combinations of the groupings, that is personal competence, personal moral, social competence, and social moral. So you can guess that most managers or business people might have which orientation do you think? Personal competence, personal moral, social competence, or social moral? What would be your guess? Personal competence. So that's what we found. So that would be interesting to see that if students come in with that, but of course, now we are kind of changing the thing to say that it's not only your personal fulfillment or personal achievements, but you want to think in a more social context too. So we could use the Rocket survey to inform how we teach business ethics. So this is just a thinking, and this is why I needed your ideas, is that how could we teach about ethics to our students? So first, we could gather information on our student attitudes. What are they coming in with? What are their thoughts on different values, on different ethical situations or ethical challenges? We can analyze their attitudes to different values and see what their orientations are. And we don't know what is the orientation. Should we tell them that certain orientation is better than others? I don't know. So that's something to think about as we plan our teaching. And then finally, to tilt our ethics curriculum based on what information we have about our students. So tilting means being very intentional in the work that we give our students. So for example, if we have them analyze a case, and it might be a business case. So firstly, it's even choice of what should they analyze. So for example, if you're talking about ethics, should we have them analyze a business like, say, Uber, that they might have experience with, or else, or some business that they may not have an immediate experience with, but they know about, let's say Apple, where they know the product, but not necessarily an experience with how the business itself functions. So these are questions that we look at tilting education or tilting the pedagogies. So this is something that we are working towards. Right now, we are running a study, a survey of our students on the Rocket, using Rocket. So we want to gather information on what are our students' ideas about various values, what do they consider important, are they already having a social orientation or a personal orientation, and so on. And the next step would be, so how do we address ethical issues that come up? So you heard our presentation. So a couple of the first presentation talked about, I don't know if you remember, was about the entrepreneurship, how different groups view entrepreneurship. I just want to bring it in because there again, you have to kind of change your approach based on what the students are coming in with, right? What is their ideas towards entrepreneurship and where you want to get. And then of course, we heard about ChatGPT and the other technology, automation and so on. And this is a very, very real issue for us with students. So even before they get out into the business world, even before they're going to make decisions that impact others, they are making all these decisions as students. So, what values do we want to communicate to them, right? And talk about the right things to do or, what choices they should be making. So thank you. That is my presentation. And I welcome all of your thoughts on this, anything, because just thinking about all this, and it's going to be an ongoing challenge, right? Because new things will come up that we have to deal with.
Thank you, Professor Sambhavi.